So we're back now. Obviously the front fender's been installed. Our next thing we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the inner fairing, this flat black piece here that everybody has to look at while they're riding the bike. 15 years ago when we started doing this, it started with just having a bike that had a damaged fairing, and we ended up painting it to match the bike. Now when you get on the bike, this is what you're looking at. So the worst looking part of the bike is what you're looking at every time you're on the bike. But what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to take this off and replace it with a color matched one. I have Chase here with us. He's one of our guys at the shop, but also works on the road with us. And as much as I hate to not get my hands involved, I'm going to let Chase do the install here so we can talk a little bit about what we're doing. So there's very few tools needed to do this job. Basically, he's going to start out with a T27 to pull the outer fairing off. You've got 3 bolts across the front and 2 on each side, right here next to the speaker and down here below the handlebars. The center bolt here is longer, so we'll leave that in place. That's holding the whole fairing in place. So you take these others out, and when we get ready, we'll pull the windshield off and then just lift the fairing out, disconnect the headlight, and we're good to go.
While I'm working on it, make yourself more efficient, I pull the cap screws out, which is a T25 also, while you're here. And there's one of these on each side.
So we set ourselves up a table to set all our bolts and stuff in. We have a tray to make sure we're not losing bolts. So there's where, with that last bolt in there, you can just pull it out.
Can you show them the inside of that fairing really quick? So what I want to point out to you guys is, see this is Dynamat. So this is a product that we have here at Klock Werks. Chris had installed some better quality speakers, but still really wasn't overjoyed with the sound. So what we did is we turned them on to the Dynamat kit. So what that does is it deadens the vibration that you lose through the back of the speaker and pushes it out through the front. And then to improve that further, what we did is we installed a Klock Werks windshield to get rid of all of that vacuum air where you get all that buffeting, so you have that nice dead space so that you get the good sound quality and a comfort ride.
Yeah, you don't want to get a nice speaker set put in your bike and then you have a stock shield, you'll just drown all your sound out.
We just do it because it looks cool.
There you go.
So next step, you're going to take this vent out. There's 2 T27 screws, 1 on each side. Then you just slide it back and it pops right out. Then I take my 3/16 Allen, come in, there's 3 Allens inside each pod. Once I get those bolts out, I'll come to the turn signals with a 1/2 inch socket or a 1/2 inch opening wrench. You'll pop these 2 screws, or nuts, pull it out, unplug your turn signal right there. You're going to switch over to a 9/16. You're going to pull the 2 bolts that support your fairing. All right, once you get your support bolts out, you have your cap here. Just pull that off, it'll pop right off. Set it off to the side somewhere where you're not going to step on it. There is a hidden bolt back in here. You're probably not going to be able to see it on video, but it's your media door screw. You're going to get it pulled out. If you forget this, your fairing will not come off. Don't forget that. Unplug your cigarette lighter. While I have this in my hand from pulling that, if it has these vents, I'll come and pull their T25, come and pull the 3 screws out for it on each side. You don't have to worry about remembering what side it's on. They're labeled left and right. So once you get all that off, I'll come in here to the gauge. This one has Dakota digital gauges in it. Generally, you'll have a plug in each of the gauges and then 1 in the center. This one just has 1 in the center until I get the fairing off. I'll unplug that, you're good to go there. You'll pull these. They're just pushed into the housing for the gauges. Pull those out, grab your T25 and get it up in here. There's 2 screws at the bottom of the center gauge. Don't pull the top one out until you get your fairing off of the bike, or you're gonna end up dropping your center gauge. So to make it easier, stand over your front fender. To pull this off, you're gonna hold your speaker pods and your fairing. You're gonna lift it up and just kind of wiggle a little bit. It'll come back towards you. Just be careful not to pull the wires from your bars or your ignition. You're gonna open your media door, push your brake line and your clutch line out of the way, and this should just separate. Wiggle it up, and it'll pop right up.
You need the fairing?
Yep, that'll pop right off.
See?
Paul, I'll show you how it comes apart on the table.
Oh, I get to do this part.
Yeah, I know you're dying to work on it.
Got 3 screws, T25s on each of the gauges. And we literally can leave these wired together because they're all just going right up here on the table. The 2 bottom ones were taken out as we did the other part. Pretty simple once it's all off the bike. Take our rubbers off of here that we need. So here's the factory one and the one we're putting on. Very simply, come back, do this in the reverse order. On the older bikes, we had to replace these moldings. The new ones, they make them where they come off and go right back on.
Yeah, while he's finishing that up, I'm gonna show you how to pull the cap off. So under here, even though these are not real buttons, there's wires still plugged into it for the buttons that you can add. You're gonna unplug those, it'll slide right up. Here's where they plug in to the cap. While I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and pull the media door cover off, and it just pops right on there. Easy. So once again, come back over top of your fender. You're gonna lean this back out. You're gonna take your fairing, get it on the bracket, and just carefully slide it down. You're gonna get your media door in the hole. The screw holes at the bottom, you're gonna have to lift up on the fairing a little bit. You're gonna take your rubber, put it in the slot in your media door pocket, and pull your fairing back. Just carefully wiggle it up, lift it up, get it set down in place.
Obviously, at this point, he's just got to do everything in reverse and put it all back together.
I usually start with my Allens that go in the speaker pods. And just like with the gauges, all the inserts in these fairings are brass. You don't want to over tighten them. You can either spin it or break the plastic if you get too crazy with it. So no impact guns, all you mechanics out there. All right, so once you get your outside bolts in, I take my lower center gauge screws. It helps if you have a magnetic tip driver to get it in there. From there, you're gonna take this and put it back on, and take your mount bolts that mount it back to the forks.
The fairing is not technically adjustable, but there is a little bit of movement back
Yep.
and forth. So when guys are messing with their bars, you might want to pull it a little forward to fit with bars being pulled up or whatever, but there's very little bit of movement there.
Once you get it back in place, you can just reach underneath, plug your wires back in, make sure you get these tabs right up underneath the radio. It'll slide right in place.
And then one question: when you do the exchange, will the exchange come with this fascia piece here, or is that a separate piece?
Yep, so it's all 3 pieces. It's your fairing, your cap, and your media door, which is right here.
Awesome.
I put it on last, just as like the finishing icing on the cake. So when I'm tightening these down, I'll come right here to the bars and I'll pull back a little bit. That way it pulls it off of your ignition. So your ignition, when you're turning, it doesn't rub on your inner fairing. Once those are tight, you want to come back, the wires you pulled out of the holes on the sides, you want to find them back underneath here and feed them back through the holes so you can plug your turn signals back in. Here, come over, plug it in, feed the wire back in, make sure you don't pinch it. Make sure it's not sitting outside of the turn signal housing. If you pinch that wire, it's going to start throwing codes, your turn signals won't work. and it can pop a fuse for all the lights, all the navigational lights on your bike.
Sounds like you've done that.
No, I've never done that. Not once. That's a lie. It happens. Before I tighten my top one, I'll get both of them started. I want to get my cap screws in, because once that turn signal's tight, it'll squeeze down on that cap, and it can make it almost impossible without messing the paint up to get your cap in the right place.
You guys, your paint's already cured when it gets to me. Like what I've noticed too, before I started using really high quality paints for some of the guys that would use cheaper paint shops and stuff, the paint's so soft when you get it back, and they don't let you know that it's soft, and then you start flaring up all over.
Even with a technically cured paint job, when you're using a non-catalyzed base coat, which is virtually every automotive paint, the base coat is not cured. So between the clear coat not being cured, which happens often, and that base coat, when you tighten something down on there, it mushrooms out like that. That happens with the Harley paint and the Harley clear, or even the Sickens clear. We don't have that issue. Again, 15 years of doing this, that is not an issue for us. A lot of guys that are doing paint work they'll be doing stuff in a non-quality booth. We've got a heated downdraft paint booth, so we can cure what we spray. We bake for an hour at 140 degrees, it's cured. We can buff it literally once it cools down, but we wait because, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's still solvents coming out. When guys use the fast clear because they don't have a baking booth, it's more lacquer style, it's less cross-linked, so the durability of it is not good. You end up with rock chips, you end up with what you're talking about with it mushrooming out. That happens. Let's get this thing put together.
It'll slide right back. Screw those in again, because they can cross-thread pretty easy. Make sure you plug your headlight in, it's very important. Make sure it's set in place, and you can roll it up, get your bolt on the top in.
At this point, you install your Klock Werks windshield.
Yes.
The factory windshield goes in the trash can. Klock Werks windshield. And the difference from what we had in this fairing to that fairing obviously makes quite a difference. Again, when you're sitting on the bike, that's what you're looking at. The fender is great, the wheels are great, all that. You don't see those unless the bike is sitting still. Now let's see how your gauges are looking. There you go, got your pretty gauges in there. Makes everything pop. Now this thing just needs a dash to match.
Wouldn't that be